episode 38 of Bibliophile series. There is an article on gaslighting, an article on how scammers try to convince you of what they are offering is not a scam, but what everyone else is offering, or at least despite the popular perception that something that doesn't work will actually work. Now, here I definitely have my own personal bias that I don't think self-help books work. I absolutely don't think self-help book works. Self-help books work for the simple reason very often, I think most of the ideas mentioned in the self-help books are basic ideas that everyone is anyway aware of. It's not like some new concept or some new idea has been introduced to us. Yet some people enjoy self-help books. That is fine. I don't think they have a impact on whether you become more productive or you become less productive. Yet this article was written by Jeroen Raji Benbrink. I think this will be a Dutch name based on the surname, and it was published in article. And see how this article is framed. Why self-help books don't work and how to nevertheless benefit from them. This is trying to get those people. See, this author has himself written a self-help book, and now he's trying to cater to the other side of the aisle by saying, yeah, I agree they don't work, but how can you benefit from them even when they don't work? This is the article. Basically, this is an exercise in good argumentation, and if you're not very careful, you will not be able to identify how gaslighting works. Let's go ahead and read it. So it starts off with 2 weeks ago, I launched my first so-called self-help book, No More Bananas. How to Keep Your Cool in the Collective Madness. It is a book that offers practical advice for staying calm and confident in today's stressful world of social media and information overload. Okay. Remember, the title of the book was Why These Books Don't Work. And the starting line is, I launched my first so-called self-help. Essentially, the dichotomy or the divergence in practice and the heading is very, very apparent right from the first statement. It is a book that offers practical advice for staying calm and confident in today's stressful world of social media and information overload. Even though very well intended, I realize that its effect may be quite limited. See, subtle argumentation without being expressively outwardly saying my book is great. Even though very well intended, I realize that its effect may be quite limited. Because, as it turns out, the effectiveness of self-help books is debatable, to say the least. Effectiveness of self-help books is debatable, to say the least. Why is this? And what can we do to make them more effective? Now see how the terms of the discussion have changed. The heading says, why self-help books don't work. And here, they have shifted the goalpost to say, effectiveness of self-help books is debatable. Essentially, there is an argument to be made that they do work, and there is an argument to be made they don't work. Basically, shifting of the target has already taken place. Absolutely wonderful writing. Why is this, and what can we do to make them more effective? Now, instead of taking on an adversarial role, the author has taken on, oh, I am on your side. I am going to find out more information. Despite me having a great bias for making one side win, I'm going to be on your side and I'm going to provide very, very nuanced and unbiased opinion on the issue. Absolute nonsense. Anyway, there is certainly no shortage of self-help books. Thousands of them are available and new ones appear every day. And they are popular too. Millions of copies have been sold of Mark Manson's 2018, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a FUCK, and Stephen R. Covey's 1989, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, to single out a recent example and a classic. Now, somebody had recommended this book to me. Another book that was gifted to me in the last year was The Courage to be Disliked. I've read this first few pages and then I realized The usage of this word was simply to invite people in, and then the theories espoused in the conversation made there is very much in line with what you would have in normal self-help books like The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, The Alchemist from Paulo Coelho, all those books, very similar framework, talking of the most basic ground level things that everyone saying stuff like being organized is nice. I know. Being punctual is nice. I know. Then how do you incorporate that into your life? That is the challenge. And I've also been recommended this Stephen R. Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, but I've never read it. I've never seen it. But okay. To point out a recent example and a classic. This is the recent example. This is the classic. Okay. Despite their popularity, though, there is a lot of criticism on self-help books. They can be grouped into three categories. Bad effect. Self-help books give wrong and sometimes harmful advice. They give false hope. They make uncertain people just feel worse about themselves, or they make people refrain from seeking professional support. That is not an objection, at least I have with self-help books. I feel self-help books are very much an exercise in redundancy. We already know stuff that is present there. It is simply taking away time from being active in the domain that we want to be active in and giving us a sense of accomplishment when nothing really is being achieved. Anyway, this is the first public objection or publicly agreed upon objection that the author has mentioned. The second is placebo effect. Now, placebos, usually when medical research is done, when you have one group of people who are being given the actual medicine and the other group of people who have been given placebos, medicines that don't really have anything in them, and then you figure out the distinction in the effectiveness of the medicine that is being offered to them. That is placebo, the medicine that has no value, basically a blank capsule that is being given. Now, placebo effect in the general sense is when sometimes there are psychosomatic disorders. There are disorders that originate in our head. So in those cases, you don't really administer any medicine to them. You simply give them something that is empty, that is not really there. And then because the people feel that they are taking some medicine, it automatically improves their situation. That placebo effect I'm aware of. Let's see what placebo effect is being talked of here. If they already work, it is not because of the advices given in the self-help books, but because of the fact that people pay attention to something that they didn't pay attention to before. So then this would not be a criticism, no? See, the way it has been defined is, if something was escaping your attention earlier, and now it has come into focus, now it is something you are paying attention to, then it is not really a criticism. It is a wonderful thing. The fact that something wonderful has been, as in something wonderful you are now paying attention to, this is not a criticism at all. But okay, no effect. Even though people may find self-help books interesting to read or just have, they don't work because the advices are just common sense or overly simplistic and people don't do anything with them. See how the roles have changed or how the blame game has changed. Advices are just common sense. This is what I object to. And the people don't do anything with them. Remember, we were looking to identify criticism of the book, but what we have now turned to is blaming the people who are reading the book instead of finding out the flaw that the books rarely have any action-driven plan that gets you to change stuff. It usually has be organized. You should make a list of priorities before going to bed every night. You should make a list of things that you want to accomplish tomorrow. Of those lists, what are the 5 most difficult things that you need to get done? 2 things that can perhaps be pushed forward. That way you plan your priorities, right? Blah and blah, lots of things. Then the blame has shifted to people instead of the book in itself being lacking in some sort of actionable plan. Such critiques appear in news like here and there, in posts that people write like here and there, and also in various books like here and there. There is abundance of such critiques, but we will simply refer to it in a single line. They're here also, they're there also, they're there also. blah, blah, blah. The sheer volume of the criticism and the tone of many of them make it seem like bashing self-help books is as popular as self-help books themselves. Bashing self-help books is not popular. It is simply when self-help books or self-help authors start taking, I have changed the life of this person, I have changed the life of that person. That is when people become angry. Because there are lots of books, there are lots of, as in, lots of people write murder mysteries. But then murder mystery authors don't go around claiming these stories that I've written have changed the life of this criminal or they have become more successful criminals on account of the book. They don't make tall claims about the effectiveness of their writing. So they don't get as much blame. But you, the self-help book writers, end up taking a lot more credit for somebody else's realization and turning life around. And that is where it starts becoming problematic. I want to zoom in on the third point above. Now, see, of the 3 points, bad effect, this is not even a criticism, bad effect, wherein the books make people feel guilty. And the third one, where you actually turn to blaming the people. That is the point the author wants to turn to. The observation that self help books often have no effect. The other 2 points are interesting as well, but depend very much on the kind of self help book and the specific advice that is offered. The last point, though, is more general. So, why don't self help books have the effect that is hoped for by the authors? Honestly, we don't care what the authors hope for from it. When we say the self help books are not great, we are not looking at, oh, it is not meeting the expectation of the authors. Because, very honestly, most authors, very much like the author of this article, are writing it for the sake of earning. Their earning potential is impacted by this. Them looking to change the world and help the reader, that is rarely ever the intention. We are more criticizing it because these books provide revenue for the author, yet provide no discernible change for the reader. But again, if you frame it in a way, so why don't self-help books have the effect that is hoped for by the authors? We are portraying authors in a positive light and claiming, oh, somehow their intended outcome is not being achieved. Absolutely wonderful. The main reason, as this article in the Journal of Happiness Studies suggests, there is an article that is referencing. The main reason, as the article in Journal of Happiness Studies suggests, is often the reader him or herself. Again, we have shifted away from the self-help books are great. It is the reader that is at fault. Let's blame the consumer without really looking at the product. Wonderful. So let's say a comparative statement that I can make is Maggie or Coca-Cola or all these fast food items that are there. They will never take responsibility for providing junk food, but they'll say people should be responsible in eating. You make all the appealing ads in the world. You make all the, let's say, unsaturated, and whatever sorts of fats are there. You use all the worst items possible for human consumption and package it and sell it and market it and do all sorts of things. But then when it comes to being responsible for health of consumers, people should restrict their diet. People should take care of this. People should take care of that. Let's blame the consumer. Let's not blame the product. It's a very, very popular strategy. It's a very, very popular way in which people argue. And that is the tack this author is also taking. When reading a self-help book, it is us who decide whether or not to do something with it. And usually we don't. Usually we don't because we have other priorities. We are not looking to manifest whatever is written in the book into reality. We have lots of other things to do. We have to go to office. We have to cook food. We have to clean the house. At that time, if somebody tells us take a 30-minute break at the starting of the day and meditate about what needs to be done at the beginning of the day, you can't do that. Or plan your day ahead with small little breaks tied in. You can't do that because the nature of your work is such that planning too far ahead is not possible. Or think of 5 things you want to achieve in the upcoming year and make plans for how will you go about achieving them. These are all fun ideas to hear, but they are not very practical. They are absolutely not very practical. Because we are living in a very, very two-dimensional existence wherein what happens next is very much a product of what we want to do and what the world wants us to do as well. We are not living in isolation wherein we decide everything about us. If the let's say if the book tells us every day you should devote some time to personal growth, personal activity, but then your day at the office has been tiring. Then you can't go back home and say, no, I will leave my office early. I will not do the work today because I have to give 30 minutes to myself every day. That cannot happen, especially for people on the lower end of the economic spectrum. These advices are very much anathema to their everyday existence. We have to glance at the book, even actually read the book. But then we go on minding our usual business. Because our usual business is so time is so difficult to address that we have to spend a lot of time in taking care of that. And we can freely do that. There is no therapist, coach, or teacher telling us what to do or keeping us on track. Okay? The blame lies with the reader, the blame lies with the consumer, not because the self-help books are not providing a mechanism by which life can be kept, not because self-help books give us an actionable plan, but because the person is not doing the stuff. So wonderful. While hiring a self-help book, which could be one solution, I have asked myself numerous times while writing No More Bananas, how can I help the reader to actually apply the advice on his or her book without needing someone to play the self-help police? Of course, that started with making the advice very practical. But that is not enough because many of the self-help books around contain quite practical advices that can be easily applied. And this is where I find it to be extremely fun. See, the author is going on to say essentially what he has to offer as a book, what he is offering as a book is not even unique. He's saying in order to ensure that the book is more relevant and useful for the people, he's given advice that is very practical. But then there are lots of self-help books around that contain quite practical advices already. So what exactly are we bringing to the table anyway? The only objective perhaps that can be fulfilled is you will get a share of the market. You will get a share of the book section that you so desperately seek and want, and are trying to convince people via this article that self-help books are great. It is the people who don't follow up. It is the people who don't follow up on the advices provided in the book that are to blame. Okay. Interestingly enough, I found an answer when staying a couple of times in Benedictine monastery. What I learned there is how you should read text in order to really learn something from them. Wonderful. So now we have also gone on to say, see, this is not something I have, it is not something that I am telling you blindly. Appealing to authority is a very common form of argument for me. When staying a couple of times in Benedictine monastery, I learned how you should read text. Certainly also implying the readers are not reading the text correctly. That is why they are not gaining the benefit out of the book. Okay. The technique they use is called Lectio Divina, which means divine reading. Originally, this referred to reading God's word, but it can be applied to other texts as well, including self-help books. Now see the comparison that is happening. Reading God's word, reading Bible or reading any religious text, and that technique can be applied to reading self-help books also. He is not outrightly saying it, he is not directly making the comparison, but can you see self-help books have been elevated? And again, this is in very much in contradiction to the headline. Why self-help books don't work? And now, the way we read God's word, or the way God's word was supposed to be read, we can apply the same technique to read self-help books, essentially enhancing the profile of self-help books, despite starting off the article by saying they don't work. Wonderful. The core idea of Lectio Divina is that you read a text very slowly and let sentences sink in one by one. You start reading slowly until there is a paragraph or sentence that appeals to you. Then you stop and read that paragraph or sentence again. and again, and again, and so forth. So, like a cow does with grass, you ruminate with words until you have digested them. So, his wonderful idea of getting self-help books to work for you is read the text slowly. And when you come across a line or a sentence that you enjoy that seems appealing to you, you read it again and again and think about it more deeply. This is another way of saying, let's meditate. Let's be very, very deliberate in our actions, which is again not a very new advice. Additionally, again, when you think of people, all walks of life, when you think of people in all walks of life, this is not an advice you can give to somebody who has lots of responsibilities. This is not an advice you can give to somebody who has lots of tasks pending. Let's read the book very, very slowly. Of course, not going to happen. By doing so, your mind starts working and connecting the thing you read to the things that you already know. So understand, self-help books don't work. The change in that is you should read it something using something called divine reading, wherein you should take more time in reading the text, going through it more slowly. The books have not changed at all. It is the way you consume books that is changing for books to become beneficial for you. Absolutely wonderful. This is how gaslighting works. I, by reading in this way, you allow yourself to internalize the text that you read, and this significantly increases the chance that you will change your behavior. And thus, that you actually benefit from the text that you read. And as research has shown, a nice side effect is that this whole reading experience itself makes you feel better. This makes applying Lectio Divina technique a double-edged sword. Why is it a double-edged sword? Because it gives you two ways in which it benefits you. It cuts through the lethargy in two ways. The first way is by reading it this way makes you feel better. And because you're reading it this way, the likelihood of you being able to apply the learnings that you got from the book is higher. Therefore, it is a double-edged sword. That is the author's argument. I completely disagree with how this has been phrased because I don't have the time, or I or anyone else who has lots of other things to take care of during the day, during the week, during the month, during the year. You do not have time to read through stuff slowly. Additionally, the passage started off by saying self-help books don't work, and it has completely transformed the blame game to the readers are not reading it rightly, which is absolutely nonsense, which is absolutely cowardly in my opinion. Anyway, so your favorite self-help book. So your favorite self-help book and start reading in this way, I'll bet you notice a difference. Now, there are lots of things, even related to cat prep industry, where I can perhaps find similarity in this, blaming the candidate over the process or the content itself can work. But let's keep it limited to this. Self-help books, the author, why I picked up this article is not because I agree with it. I picked up this article just to show you. See, I absolutely appreciate the writing style. I absolutely appreciate the writing style because the author has clearly along the way, changed or moved goalposts tremendously. First, books are not great. The headline tells you something. Then it starts off by saying, yes, I have my own personal bias. I have come up with my own book. No more bananas, but very practical advice. Then two classics have been mentioned. Then common criticisms of the books have been mentioned, of which three common criticisms. One of them is not even a criticism. The placebo effect, as described here, is not even a criticism. And then the third point, where instead of blaming the book, we are blaming the reader, we are blaming the consumer. That is the point he has taken up. And then gone on to say, what should the reader do differently? Not what the book can be, then how the book can be better. What should the reader do differently? And then there is a subtle comparison between God's word and the self-help books, how you should be reading them. And then you have to internalize. And the advice is also something that can be given in one very simple line. Read the text slowly. When you come across something that is interesting, read it over and over again. You are not in a rush to complete the book. You should be taking time to absorb it. This is one of my bigger challenges with self-help books. Stuff that can be stated in 1 or 2 lines, they usually take up a lot of time to say. And given this is an article, it ends here. Had it been a book, it would have perhaps taken 10 pages to get to this point alone. Maybe it is my personality that I find it so irritating. You can get to the point quickly, then get to the point quickly. Some people like verbose framing of ideas. I don't. And for me, self-help books make absolutely no sense. I'm not saying that those who read self-help books are bad people or are wasting their time. I'm saying self-help books is not the path to improvement. The path to improvement is you making conscious changes. And I'm sure every one of us has lived long enough to realize what are the conscious changes we need to make. It is just that sometimes self-help books help, but more often than not, self-help books are an addendum rather than the cause for change. So the cause for change has to be you deciding from today, I will be more responsible. I will take care of things that I'm missing out on. As long as you do that, life will go smoothly, or at least smoother than what it is going right now. The article length is 808 words and number of sentences is 47. It's a very, very simple article. The grade level is 8.1, suitable for someone in the 8th grade, and the reading is score is 67.58. It is written in plain English, easily understood to 13 to 15-year-olds. The article is very, very simple. But hopefully you understand the words in themselves are simple. The idea or the misdirection or shifting of the goalpost is not simple. And that is why I wanted to cover this article. Hopefully you learned something. That will be all for this episode. See you in the next one.